Welcome to Politically Basic. I'm your host, Kyle Campbell. We're breaking down the basics of all political issues and current political events so that you get to decide. This year is all about Gen Z, who they are, what do they think and want and need, and more importantly, what are they going to do on November 5th? Well, nobody knows better than my guest today, Brilyn Hollyhand. He's 18 and a major political commentator and a strategist, and a great one, who started the Truth Gazette, a conservative news service, at the age of 11. He hosts the Brilyn Hollyhand Show and now adds published author to his extensive resume. He's just written a brilliant new book called One Generation Away, Why Now is the Time to Restore American Freedom, and currently serves as the chairman of the RNC's inaugural Youth Advisory Council. Welcome, Brilyn. Thank you so much for joining me on Politically Basic today.
Kyle, it's an honor. I'm a big fan of the podcast, so this is a really cool experience, and I'm just honored to get to talk to you today.
Well,
thanks for having me.
It's my joy, and can I just say, what am I even doing with my life? You have accomplished so much, and you're only 18. It's very inspirational, I have to tell you.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. It's been a fun 7-year journey, and we're only continuing on from here.
You're doing so well. And let's just jump right in. We talk basics here, and I would love for you to share with my audience just how you have accomplished so much by age 18. Tell us a little bit about your history and how you have really just exploded on the scene as a leading young voice in American politics today.
Well, thank you. That's very kind of you. I would love to start at the very beginning, and that is in 4th grade. It was the 2016 presidential election, and I was SGA's vice president at my school, and we had this mock election in our library, and I remember kind of counting the votes and sitting at that desk in the library and thinking, this is such a cool experience that we live in a country with this democracy where everybody gets to have a voice and have a vote. This is awesome. This is really great. I can't wait to vote someday. And now 7 years later, I'm getting to vote for the first time this November. So that's a full circle experience. But it was that same election cycle in 2016 that first drew me into politics. I was watching, I vividly remember walking through my living room and my parents watching one of those fiery debates between Trump and Hillary. And Kyle, we really thought politics was divisive in 2016, but 8 years later, somehow it's only gotten more divisive. Here we are. So I really was like, this is interesting. This is something that, I don't see many young people getting involved in, but I think we need to get involved in, because as we see on the stage, it's a lot of older candidates going against each other. And I, really thought it was time for younger representation. So continue to pay attention to politics for the next few months. And in July of 2017, finally I had enough. And for months, Kyle, I had said, our country's in a bad shape, but don't worry, my parents are going to fix it. My grandparents are going to fix it. We'll be okay. Everything will be fine. Well, my parents' generation didn't fix it, Kyle. My grandparents' generation didn't fix it. And so I decided that I was going to start speaking out. I couldn't run for office. I was 11. I couldn't even have a social media account until I was 13, but I did decide I could start writing opinion columns. So I started my career in politics writing opinion columns, then moved into kind of the more media sphere of filming videos and podcasts and that type of stuff. But I did come back to writing this year when I wrote my first debut book, and it debuted at number 3 on the Amazon bestsellers list, which is just amazing to see that many people are supporting young Gen Z Americans. And I'm so excited to get to talk about it with you today.
That is such an incredible story. I mean, you poor thing, first of all, because you kind of became aware of politics during the 2016 election, which was histrionic at best and very contentious and really did divide the country so much. And instead of kind of shying away, which a lot of people did, they sort of banished political talk amongst family and friends. You sort of went the opposite direction and dove in. What was it about your environment? Was it, family support or your school? What gave you, maybe it was just you and your amazing personality. What kind of gave you that push to start writing and eventually start doing those videos?
So I definitely say it was, community support. The very first time I ever put up a Word doc and actually wrote out my first opinion column, it was sent to 7 uncles and aunts and kind of those close family members that it would be awkward if they didn't read it at the Thanksgiving table. They kind of were forced to support me. And then from there, they just kept forwarding it on. And it was really cool to see that. But a lot of people look back at it and say, oh, you were this kid that was groomed into politics. Your parents must have forced you to been in there. Your mom and dad must have, been in very highfalutin political circles. Kyle, that's just the furthest thing from the truth. My mom was a school teacher and dad's in construction. So as far away as you can get from politics. But the really cool thing is, yes, I'm a Christian and a conservative, and those values and morals do come from my parents. I was taught in the living room from a very early age to be a Christian and to be a conservative, and why, those were the right principles. And now I've become an independent thinker, an independent mind as I've been in politics for 7 years. There are things that I disagree with my parents on, and there are things I don't disagree with my parents on. There are places in politics where I go to right and to the left of my parents. But at the end of the day, we still agree, and at the end of the day, they're still the ones that actually brought me into the world and brought me with these morals and values, and it still does from such a young age. So we talk about all the time, what's wrong with our generation, what's going on right now. It really goes back to the strong community support around you, and I appreciate you bringing up that point.
Yeah, it's just amazing, and I hope that the younger generations are taking note and that they do follow in your footsteps. You talk a lot about that very thing in your new book. I've got it here, One Generation Away.
Thank you.
Congratulations. It's been a complete success, and it is so timely. So everybody needs to grab this and read it. It's very inspirational. But tell us a little bit about the book, what it's about, and why you wrote this now.
Yeah, so I started off the segment telling you that I got interested in politics at the age of 11. So since the age of 11, I'm 18 now, just turned 18 last month, I've been traveling the country, talking to as many Americans as I could, but more importantly, Kyle, doing what you do, listening to Americans. And what I've constantly heard from people is that they do not have hope in our future. This goes for young Americans, old Americans, Americans on the right and on the left. They constantly do not have hope in our future. And that's a really sad state of affairs. And so I wrote this book to counteract that. I wrote this book to tell people, hey, there is hope in this future. It's up to us to stand up. Obviously, the title One Generation Away came from the famous Reagan quote, freedom is one generation away from total extinction. That's the quote that I close every speech I give, whether it's at a retirement community or at a college campus. I make a point to close that because I think it's a stark reminder, not to be a fearmonger, Kyle, but a stark reminder that freedom is on that brink of extinction. It could be gone by the wayside in one single day if we do not constantly fight for and defend it. And so that's my message to my generation is, yeah, it's kind of a scary time when you look at the future. But if all of us get up and off the sidelines, I think we're in a good position. And so I mentioned a lot of football references in the book. I'm born and raised in Tuscaloosa, Alabama. The SEC football, championship schools in my backyard. I was at every football game last year, and I constantly tell people, especially when I'm on campuses, because it relates really well with young people, is that this is our time to get off the sidelines. You can't win a football game sitting on the sidelines. That goes for Christians and conservatives out there. This is your time to stand up. For too long, we've been the silent majority. For way too long. And my generation, the blue-haired crazy liberals that you see on the screen shutting down college campuses with these protests are the loud minority, but we cannot let them take all the mic time. We have to stand up. We have to be bold.
What's the reaction and the response that you're getting to what you've written? And now I know you're just doing the media blitz and the media circuit, and you're getting out there. You're so well-spoken. You have a really good sense of what issues are affecting young people right now. When you are sharing this, what's the response that you're getting?
It's definitely mixed. So I would say a lot of it has been positive, which is very, very appreciative. I mentioned my community, and I had kind of a back and forth with my publishing team. They wanted me to fly up to New York and do this big launch party the day before the book came out. And I was like, who in the world is going to be at a New York launch party? I don't know anybody in New York. And they're like, oh, our friends will be there. And I was like, yeah, we're not doing that. Let's come to my hometown and have a launch party with my community who supported me since I was 11. And I expected about 50 people at this venue we rented out. And Kyle, we had 556. So I was completely blown away. It was out the door, standing room only. So there's been a lot of positive reaction. I mentioned the book made it up to #2 on Amazon. That's very positive. We appreciate that. Of course, as you become a little bit more, as a public figure, a little bit more media time, a little bit more speaking time, you get more criticism, you get more death threats. I think I read 6 this morning before I hopped on the Zoom link. So we see that a lot. So I would say it's been mixed, but I would say for the most part from young people, regardless of if they're right or left, it has been positive. It's been really cool to see people come up to me after book signings or speaking events and say, hey, I disagree with every single thing you said on stage. I'm not voting for Donald Trump as much as you try to tell me to, but I'm so glad that you're standing up and doing something. I'm so glad to see a young person actually talking to us as opposed to DC just sending more old people to talk down to us. So that part's been positive, and that's what's encouraging me to keep going.
Isn't that interesting? And I want to ask you about something. It might be a little controversial what I'm going to say, but you're such a good example of the type of voter that both presidential candidates are trying to court right now. What we constantly hear from these campaigns is, oh, we've got to engage the the young people. We've got to engage the younger voter. And you've just turned 18 and you are a voter now. But we also kind of have this two sides of the coin in our perception of younger generations in this country. I want to see if you agree or disagree with this statement. It's sort of like, and I don't know what experience you've had. I'm glad that you're getting a positive experience, and I'm infuriated that you're getting death threats, because that is absolutely insane and so wrong. Because the whole point and what we keep hearing is, oh, we've got to engage the younger people. We've got to, help them, support them to participate in this civic experience. And of course, they want your vote, but they want to know what's going on with you. Or maybe they don't. Maybe they just want the vote. But we sort of have this like dichotomy of ways of thinking about younger people. And we kind of have an ageism problem in our country. What do you think about that?
So I think a lot of it is when I walk into a room, people get scared as, politicians or people that have been in politics a while or around it, because they're like, oh, he's trying to come for our job. And that's by no means what it is. When I say I want Gen Z to have a seat at the table, I don't want to kick, the previous generation to the table. I want to put one of those leaflets that we put in the Thanksgiving dinner table at my house to expand the table so we can all sit around it and I can learn from them. And I think that's the, appropriate way to respond to the ageism issue that's going on. But that's how we have to do it. I mean, you mentioned, Republican candidates and Democrat candidates right now trying to court young voters. Just during the primary process, I met one-on-one backstage at events with Donald Trump, Ron DeSantis, Vivek Ramaswamy, RFK Jr., Nikki Haley. I mean, all of them wanted to have conversations about how they can win the youth vote. This is still during the primary process. And now, obviously, I'm working full-time with President Trump with the RNC and getting the youth vote together with the RNC position you mentioned. But everybody right now is trying to figure out how they can get the youth vote, what they could do to win the youth vote. And it's this whole topic of whoever wins Gen Z is going to win the White House. And it's true, but it can't just be false promises. It can't just be trying to bribe votes with saying they're going to cancel student loans. That's not going to work for young people. We've been lied to for so long. We are still fed up and frustrated from the experience that we went through during COVID, because really, Kyle, COVID taught my generation how bad big government was. It really made a lot of us, if we weren't conservative, at least turned off to big government. And you're seeing even protests on the left about this now, because I was in middle school when this happened. Big government told me I had to stay out of school for a year and a half, strap a diaper to my face anytime I walked outside, and forced me to stay away from my grandmother at Thanksgiving if I was an evil, horrible person. They really tried to tell us, what to do and what to say and what to think. And that really turned a lot of people off. So when you talk about ageism, you talk about where we are as a country, that's the number one issue for young people as we go into this election.
Let's talk about Gen Z. If they're going to swing this election one way or the other, and it is, hands down, the most important presidential election of our lifetimes. There's just no arguing it. I would love for somebody to argue that with either one of us. Let's talk about Gen Z. They're a very different generation. They have grown up in a completely digital age, and what they think and what they want, or what they think they want, is very, very different from the generations who've come before them. You know about this better than anybody right now. Who do you think Gen Z is?
I think Gen Z is Americans that are just simply frustrated. Like I said, I think they're people that look out of the country right now and not necessarily, put partisanship aside, are genuinely frustrated with the path the country's going on, regardless of who they blame for it. We're frustrated. So that's the number one word. I think when we do look at polling, this backs us up. Number one issue is the economy. We look out at the country right now, and it's so difficult for my parents and grandparents' generation to survive in the current economy from the Biden-Harris administration. But it's even more difficult for my generation to get a start in this economy from the Biden-Harris administration. We look right now, you and I were talking off camera a while ago about the conventions going on. Obviously, there's one next week with the DNC. I was in Milwaukee a few weeks ago for the RNCs, and I remember driving every morning in an Uber to the convention hall and driving away from the convention hall every single night in an Uber. Every single Uber driver I had the 5 days I was in Milwaukee was driven by a college student, taking their second or third job, Kyle, just to make ends meet in this current economy. That's the state of affairs that we have right now. And it's unfortunate. It's sad. That goes for regardless of who you're supporting, you're still being affected by this. I have peers that couldn't go on road trips this summer and enjoy their, final years of high school and college because they simply couldn't afford the gas. I have friends that, simply, like I told you, are taking the second or third job, but really aren't even able to find a job right now with everything going on. And that's unfortunate. It's where we live in a country right now, and a lot of them can't even buy homes. A lot of us are going into this financially independent phase of life, and we can't even do that. And the other thing, security. I mean, my generation misses the day when Law and Order wasn't just the title of the TV show, Kyle. It was the actual standard here in America. A lot of that's border security. You hear a lot of partisanship around border security, and that's true. I really think a turning point for Gen Z was when Lincoln Riley was brutally murdered in the state next to me in Georgia on a college campus, a state that's not a border state at all. Georgia's very far away from the border, but still, we saw the effects of somebody coming into the border, brutally raping and murdering her, and that be the effect of that, an innocent college student. That kind of woke a lot of us up to this is the reality. This really can happen to anybody, anywhere if we continue to have lawlessness in the country. So this is the state of affairs we live in. I understand why people don't have hope in the future. I get that. But what I constantly tell people, and this is simple, is I have hope in this future. And it's for one reason alone. I put my hope in Jesus Christ alone, not in a DC bureaucrat. And when we tell that on a college campus, a lot of people, even people that aren't necessarily religious, start thinking. You can see the wheels turning of, why is this guy so happy? Why does he describe himself as a happy warrior? He's the one traveling the country and seeing how bad it is. How can he still have hope? And it's for that reason alone.
Yeah, absolutely. Gen Z used to have at the top of their issues list mental health support.
Yeah.
I'm glad actually now it's the economy. I'm not glad for the reason that it's the economy, but they are very focused on getting support that they haven't had. And you can understand completely why mental health support would be at the top of their list. They are looking at a future that is really, really bleak and depressing and having a hard time finding that path forward to get to that good life, to find that pursuit of happiness and that way forward to achieve that generations that have come before them have had the opportunity to have. So of course you guys are depressed. And do you think in the work that you're doing, you're trying to reach out to these voters, and it's voters like you who've just turned 18, and I think Gen Z at the top end, you guys are turning 27, 28 this year. That's a pretty compacted, decade of years of voters. Do you think that this group of Gen Z voters are right now able to make these determinations? They're getting the right information, they're getting the education to be able to see their options clearly and make an informed determination on election day?
Yeah, so two really important things there, Kyle, the education aspect and then obviously mental health. And I'll start with mental health. I think that is the crisis plaguing my generation today and really plaguing the nation. And it's not talked about enough in politics at all. Very few people are willing to go there. Very few people are willing to discuss it. I'm not afraid of it because I've seen it, firsthand with my family and my friends, the people around me. And it's terrifying that there's no help for this. And it's something that it's the stigma today where you can't talk about it, where you can't be freely open about it. That needs to be something that's being championed by politicians on both sides of the aisle to actually work for help for that. Because again, like you've said, this isn't something just since COVID. It's been worse since COVID. But for decades, my generation has been dealing with the mental health crisis. That leads into a lot of other different things going on in the country that we can get into in a whole separate episode. But that's absolutely something that needs to be addressed and needs to be addressed very head on, regardless of who's in the White House in January. The second thing is education. And I think that's another big thing. I mean, last year I took an AP US history class. This year I'm taking an AP Gov class in my senior year of high school. And it's very interesting to see, as somebody that's in politics and somebody that's a history nerd, these teachers have to dance around politics and the curriculum. And I get, you have to be biased and all that, and I fully support that. But we have an election in November, and because of that, the AP curriculum, they will not talk about politics. They will not educate us on the election cycle going on, which leaves my generation to get all of our information strictly from social media, because that's the only place we know how to get it. And we know how bad information can be through social media. Either it's half-truths, misinformation, completely biased one way or the other, or just completely random and have nothing to do with politics. There's just some, wacko in their basement just making a TikTok video, it going viral in my generation thinking it's true. And so that's absolutely something that needs to be happening. We need to have some type of way for young people to hear about both sides, hear about both candidates leading into this, like you said, the most important election in American history, regardless of which side of the aisle you sit on. That needs to be education that's happening in the schools, and it's not right now, Kyle.
And the sources of getting that information are so critical right now. There's a
Yeah.
real fight for our attention. And it makes me think of, have you heard of this trend amongst Gen Z? Have you heard of coastal grandma?
Yeah.
You know what coastal grandma is? Okay. Well, I think this is actually really relevant and very exemplary of what is going on a little bit in your generation. It's more happening with the women, but there is this desire to sort of like almost skip over the kind of adult years and not deal with adulting and kind of skip to retirement, right? And like be coastal grandma. They want to knit, they want to garden, they want to live this sort of like fabulous retirement lifestyle and wear white and have this East Coast aesthetic and, you know, live the shore life, right? And it's just so fascinating to me. When I first heard this, I was like, why does Gen Z want to live a grandma lifestyle? I was not making that connection. When I learned about it a little bit more, because the kids were talking about it, I was like, this makes perfect sense. Things are so difficult right now. They're so stressful. There's this desire to kind of check out from the tough bits and just skip to like the good, happy, relaxing, you know, safe and peaceful later part of life. And it kind of made me sad in a way. And like, of course, everybody wants to skip to retirement, but we've got to be serving Gen Z way better than this. There's such a swirl right now of social media options for you guys to pay attention to. Talk to me a little bit about that. How do you cut through? I mean, worse than ever, don't you think right now? You've got campaigns trying to buy off influencers, and the media is so complicit in supporting, you know, one candidate over another and covering for a candidate over another. How do you cut through all that noise and get to what's real and what's true?
Yeah, well, I think social media is still this new landscape that politicians don't really know how to interact with, that campaigns don't know how to interact with. You know, they say in history books that the 2008 election was the first Twitter election, with Obama coming up and first using the social media app and kind of embracing it for the first time. And I think that's true. But Kyle, I also think 2024 is going to be the first TikTok election.
Mm-hmm.
And I understand it. I mean, I made the pitch personally to President Trump. I've told the story a few times, but I'll share it with you, that we were backstage at a fundraiser a few months ago. He was strictly using True Social at the time. And the Secret Service, he's kind of, when he's backstage at an event, they have this little kind of curtain area around him, just for kind of security perimeter. And they pulled the curtain, and I'm walking back, and he sees me, and he waves his hand in the air, typical Trump fashion. And he goes, "Brilyn, what can we do to win the youth vote?" And I said, "Mr. President, it's simple. You've got to get on mainstream social media platforms." And he goes, "I know social media better than anybody. I understand social media. We're doing social media well." And I said, "Well, you are. That's right. But you're only on True Social. You're just getting your message out to an echo chamber of your own supporters that are not listening outside of your own bubble. You have to get to young people. My generation is not on True Social. We're not hearing your message and your policies through social media. We've got to do something, you know, outside of that." And so he listened. He got back on Instagram a few weeks after that. And a few months after that, he actually started his TikTok account. And he has the fastest growing TikTok account in TikTok history, because it's simple, it's organic, it's natural. I mean, we constantly say he was the first social media influencer, because really, if you think about it, back in 2015, that's kind of how he became on the political landscape, tweeting his social media, you know, political hot takes, and it worked, and it kind of got him in the political conversation when he ran for president. So whichever candidate embraces social media the most, they think they're going to win. And to an extent, they're going to get their message out to young people. We're constantly scrolling and scrolling and scrolling. We're going to see your videos, your ads, or whatever digital advertisement you've got on there. But at some point, it becomes this flood of overwhelmingness for my generation. I think that's what a lot of us are feeling right now. We're becoming numb to politics. And that it goes right in with what you just said earlier about kind of this new trend in my generation, where we're constantly just getting overflowed with information. Because all of it is, first of all, none of it's organic, none of it's real, none of it's natural. It's a politician sitting in front of a screen and saying, you know, "Good morning, my fellow Americans. Pause. Thank you for welcoming me on your For You page. Pause." Like, it's not working. And we've got to actually embrace this. So we've seen this rise of kind of these Gen Z interns attempting to take over social media, and it's working. But I really think the big thing is what we said originally, meeting my generation where we are online, but actually making sure it's real organic connection. And the big thing I've been telling the Trump campaign is we can't overlook grassroots efforts. Grassroots efforts are what's won politics for decades. Just because social media is this new tool doesn't mean we have to put all of our, eggs in that basket. We still need to be on college campuses this November when school starts back and doing things leading up to the election, actually making sure that we're at game days, that we're tailgating, that we're actually going to, and this is something I pitched to President Trump directly, going to fraternities and sororities directly, going to these already organized groups. Picture Trump getting out of his SUV, walking into a frat house and engaging directly with some frat guys. Like the media would go crazy. He's already natural and organic in that state. It would be wonderful without a teleprompter. But all he would have to do is hand out a big stack of voter registration forms through a college campus, and he's got their vote, and it would actually get the message out to register to vote. So it's simple things like that we need to move more towards, as opposed to just putting every egg in the social media basket.
Well, I sure hope he listens to you. It sounds like he has, and he needs to keep you close, Brilyn, because I'm hearing he's not listening to much of anybody. So that's very impressive. And you just continue to be a hot commodity in the political world. So that was excellent advice. I think he's just back on X now as well after the Elon Musk interview. So it's good that things are going in the right direction there with him reaching out, because the other side certainly is. And I want to keep talking about this generation, your book, and how to not just connect the dots for them in what they're looking for in order to fill in the bubble next to a certain name on election day. It goes so much further beyond that. It's so cliche to say, the youth are our future, but this is what happens. You grow up and you run the country, and we've got to understand your generation better and the differences and the challenges that you're working through. I've been reading recently that marriage and birth rates are down, but 93% of Zoomers say they're interested in getting married. It's such a unique demographic in what you guys have survived. You survived COVID when you were in school. That you were separated from social interaction. There are friendship apps now, right? That you're trying to kind of venture out of the woods of solitude and participate again. Do you see this happening? And what do you think Gen Z wants in terms of a future? Is it still that traditional, marriage, family, single family home with the white picket fence, traditional job, or are they on a different trajectory, do you think?
Well, that's certainly what I want, and I can't speak for all of my peers, but I wrote about this in the beginning of the book. The first section of the book is broken in three sections. The first section is kind of the context, the historical context of, where young people were when the term teenager was first coined post World War II to where we actually are now as a nation. And yeah, a lot of things have changed. A lot of the morals and values and actually expectations have changed. But as you mentioned in polling, things seem to be maybe shifting backwards to where they used to be. So we're going to see how that kind of plays out over the next 5 to 10-ish years. But I think a really big thing, and you talk about young people getting involved, is the last line of my book. And it's something that, again, when I submitted it, the team around me was like, "Oh, you got to land the plane a little bit softer, Brilyn. Let's do something that's going to make them close the book and be peaceful." And I said, why in the world would I want them to close the book and take a nap? I want them to close the book and get off the sidelines and go do something. So the last line of the book is step up, be bold, speak out. We've got a country to save. And again, the team was like, "Oh, let's soften that a little bit to step up, be bold, speak out. Thanks for reading." And no, it needs to be hey, let's go do something. Actually get off the sidelines. Again, either side of the aisle can listen to us. And I think that's what my generation's wanted to do. You're seeing us become more politically interested right now. Again, you mentioned what we've been through, what we've lived through, what we've seen. And I think that's the simple reason why. So the day after Trump spoke at the RNC convention, I flew from Milwaukee back home to Alabama, got back in town just in time to this small town called Coleman. And they had this event called Rock the South. And it's the largest country music festival in the entire South. It had 33,000 young people in this huge field with Eric Church and Jelly Roll and a bunch of other people headlining. So I got to be the person to speak right before Eric Church. And Kyle, I don't think I ever want to open for Eric Church again. It was a very intimidating thing. Coming on before the chief is kind of scary. But I walked on stage to 33,000 people, and my message was simple. I knew I was going to talk to people that are Trump supporters or Harris suggested else or Harris supporters. And didn't want to do something to be more dividing. I told you that I got into politics because I thought it was too divisive and we need to be more unified. And so my message was simple. I put a QR code on the two huge screens around me. And I said, listen, guys, take out your phones right now. Scan these QR codes and register to vote. A lot of us are being loud. A lot of us are, dyeing our hair a certain color in protest. We're grabbing megaphones in protest. We're shutting down campuses in protest. We're posting, trendy hashtags in our social media stories and protest. All of that's great, but none of it is going to make real change unless you actually vote. So I'm not here today to tell you to vote for a specific person. I'm telling you to scan this QR code so you can register to vote, and it'll send you a reminder to actually vote on election day because it's that important to vote. It's that simple. Our parents, our grandparents' generation fought for and defended our right to actually be able to vote. They didn't necessarily hand us the best nation, to kind of to take over in this position that we're in right now, but at least we can vote and try to make it better. And so that was my message to them then. It's my message now is leading up to November. I think we're about 80 days away. It's that important to vote.
Well, we certainly appreciate your stance and position of bringing people together. I think the nation is so ready for that and hungry for that. What else besides voting would you recommend? So you were 11 and you were a hard charger. You went in a solid direction and you started writing and you started recording. For those in your generation who are looking to make a difference here, looking to have their voice heard and to do something meaningful, obviously registering to vote and voting is really one of the best things that they can do. What else would you suggest to them to have the biggest impact?
Yeah. So that last line in the book was step up, be bold, speak out. So to break it down, step up. And this is for people that the voting message is for people that just want to improve the nation, that simply they don't want to get in politics. They just want to live in a better society and raise our future families a better society. That's for you. If you want to take it a step further and actually be an activist, actually be somebody speaking out, whether it's a commentary, actually maybe even running for office one day, because we need more young people to run for office. This is my message for them. Stepping up means, like we said originally, getting off the sidelines. That first step is the hardest step. It's so difficult. You know how quickly everybody around you could immediately turn on you. You know how quickly, the hate's going to start pouring in. But I promise you, saving the nation is so worth it. So that first step's the hardest. And then the second step's the second hardest. But you have to continue. You have to continue. It's been a 7-year journey, a 7-year fight of me constantly waking up and doing this, of missing out on pivotal moments of my teenage years. But again, doing it because saving the nation is worth it to me, Kyle. And I think it's worth it to a lot of people out there. So stepping up's the first step. The second step is being bold. And really, I think what we need right now in politics is authenticity and genuine people. Again, this goes for both sides of the aisle. We need people that are willing to actually be bold and share their true, honest opinions, not reading off of a talking point script, not saying something, cowering to the corner because they're terrified of being canceled or having somebody, push back against them. Actually be bold. And the last one is just speak out. And that simply can be anything. That can be through social media. That can be as simple as sharing something to your Instagram story, retweeting a post, filming a video, direct to camera, and moving on with your day. Or that could be actually starting a social media account for politics, like actually making that a brand that you want to do. That could be writing articles like myself. That could be writing a book like yourself. That could be starting a podcast like Politically Basic. It could be something very simple, getting involved to start with, and then growing it into something bigger if you actually do want to speak out. And I think it's important for more young people to speak out. I love when I go to places. I was in North Carolina this past weekend, actually a week ago today, and it was really, really cool to see all of these other young speakers in the green room with me, like other Gen Z speakers, whether they're in college or out of college, sit next to me in the green room. Because again, for 7 years, it's been me and all the white hair folks sitting in the green room together. So that was really cool to see other young people speaking out and actually making an effort to travel the country. Again, a lot of us in that green room disagreed, but it was so rewarding to see young people. And I think we can start that movement right now.
Well, the energy is certainly high. And so I love hearing tangible ways that they can get involved. So you're at the RNC now. You're officially working with the RNC and you're behind the scenes. You're interacting with Trump and Vance and you're really, truly an insider. It's amazing. What are you seeing and what's your perspective on where the RNC is today versus where it was in the last election cycle. There's been leadership change and a lot of shifting.
Oh, yeah.
What's the status today?
So let's start it from the very beginning of kind of my entry point with the RNC. So I did politics for 6 years as in a commentary role and finally got to a point where I was fed up of just being in this talking head position, just constantly complaining about how bad things were, but not actually doing something to fix it. And so I said, that's not what I want to do. That's not how I want to be. Let's actually promote real change. This frustration with me personally started after the 2022 midterms. Republicans had not won an election cycle since 2016. We thought 2022 was going to be this time that this red wave was coming. Everybody on their TV screen said there was going to be this big red wave. And Kyle, you know it didn't happen. And I was frustrated. And so there was a few month period, there were a lot of fingers being pointed, a lot of blame was being thrown around to either we had bad candidates, it was the policies we were supporting, it was the bad people endorsing them, it was party leadership. And I thought it was simple. The left really embraced Gen Z in that election cycle, and we had zero youth outreach. Zero. Didn't have any social media outreach or grassroots outreach, and that was a major failure of our party. So I sat down at the beginning of January 2023 and wrote out this long form op-ed titled "The GOP Must Address the Elephant in the Room, Gen Z." It went viral the next morning. I was on Fox and Friends, and I was actually calling out the RNC. I called the RNC an endangered species at risk of extinction if they didn't start embracing young people. My own party calling out because I thought it was that important going into 2024 to move towards embracing. I thought it was that important. Well, little did I know, the then chairwoman of the RNC, Ronna McDaniel, was watching that segment. And again, this is somebody that I'm calling out on national news. I got off there and had a text from her assistant. Ronna would like to talk to you tomorrow. What time can you meet? I was terrified. This is the very first story I share in the book because an underlining theme of the book is hard conversations and how we need to have hard conversations to heal America. So I start the book with, hey, let me tell you a really scary hard conversation I had where I literally in that moment, Kyle, thought I was getting blacklisted from the party. I thought that was it. I was done for. And I met with her the next morning. And just to give you a little context, this was a Saturday morning meeting with the chairwoman of the RNC. Politicians, especially in DC, you know this, do not work on Saturday. So the fact that they were calling in on the Saturday morning to the meeting, I thought it was really done for. I was like, this is it. Like, I'm never going to have an interview again. Like, we're over. And she said, I liked what you said on the news yesterday morning. And I said, you did? And she said, yeah, like you're actually, what you're speaking out for is something we need to do. You're actually seeing a hole in the party that we need to fill. What can we do? And I said, well, Madam Chairwoman, just a thought. The DNC founded this thing called a youth council in 2005, a youth advisory council for Gen Z members all across the country represented in different ways of life, private sector, public sector, TV commentary to politicians, actually sitting at a round table once a month and telling the DNC what they could be doing to reach out to them. And she said, oh, that's an interesting idea. And I said, it is. And it's sad that they've had one for 20 years and we haven't even thought of one. So what if we started one? And she said, I kind of like that idea. So I thought that was that. We hung up the phone, moved on with my life, did a few more interviews, went to school the next few days. That was it. She calls back. Okay, we're going to do a youth council. That's amazing. Thank you so much. Best of luck with it. Can't wait to see where it goes. Oh, but wait, one thing. We're only doing it if you agree to come on and chair it. I said, oh, goodness, what did I get myself into? So pitched the idea, ended up getting to chair it. And for the past year and a half, that's what we've done. I got to travel the country, actually bringing change to the RNC, this grand old party, actually modernizing and revitalizing it, teaching them, first of all, how to use social media correctly, how to reach out to young people, but also how to most importantly do that grassroots outreach and how to reach out to young people directly on college campuses or at youth events. It's been so cool to see. Obviously, we did have a staff turnover when Laura Trump came in as the RNC co-chairwoman, who's a friend of mine, and then Michael Watley now is our actual chairwoman. He's a really, really close friend of mine, obviously from North Carolina, so kind of a Southern boy as well. And him and I worked really closely together because he was the election integrity chief at the RNC before he became the chairman. And that's a big issue of mine. I want to make sure the elections are secure, it's easy to vote, and hard to cheat. And that's something that him and I already worked closely on because young people care about that. So he is somebody and she is somebody that understands the power of social media, understands young people. And even since they've taken over, it has been amazing to see the outreach. One specific story for you. We did the convention 2 weeks ago, 3 weeks ago, I guess at this point in Milwaukee. They let me fly up 100 social media influencers to the suite at the top floor of the convention hall to cover the convention all week. They had all access passes. I even got them floor badges to the convention floor. And if you know anything about conventions, the floor passes are really, really difficult to get because of security. But we got the opportunity to give all 100 creators floor access to give Gen Z a front row seat to democracy in action. We had content creators in that suite that disagreed with us. We had content creators that were lifestyle creators, that were cooking creators, that were video game streamers, had nothing to do with politics, but they had large audiences of 5, 6, 7 million followers. And they got to go and cover the convention. So young people that didn't even know a convention was going on, they got to cover. So that's just a little bit of what we're doing with the council in the past year and a half.
Smart, smart, smart. Brilyn, people listen to you. I'm listening and I'm paying attention, and I want everybody to pay attention because I'm going to be watching what you do. I think you have, sky's the limit for you here. I'm sure you've heard that before, but I really, truly hope that everybody listens to everything that you say because that's the way forward. And I want to ask you something here, and this is going to maybe push you out of your comfort zone just a little bit, but I'm hearing you be more comfortable than most people in politics in having those hard conversations, just like you explain in your book and like you're talking about right now. Are we having those hard conversations now? And if not, what should we be talking about? What should we be saying? What should we be calling out? What should we be addressing that we're not right now in this political election season?
Yeah, so a message that I've been talking about internally and kind of raising the alarm on, and you want to talk about going somewhere that a lot of people don't want to talk about, I'll go straight there. And the issue, when you look at polling that we've been losing on a lot, is our messaging for abortion. And so that's something that I've been hitting on a lot internally, talking with our team of, listen, we have the right message, we're on the right side of history, but we have a messaging problem in how we talk about things. And abortion's a perfect example of that. So I'll break it down this way. For decades, we have had Republicans walk on a campaign stage and say, abortion is murder, I'm anti-abortion, and walk off and cower in the corner because they get scared and that's it. They don't explain that they're pro-life, pro-family, pro-woman. They don't word it that way. They don't actually say, what they're for instead of just saying, I'm against this, I'm against this, I'm against this. And also, they stick to the topic or the headline, abortion is murder, way too much instead of actually explaining maybe why abortion's murder. And I agree that it is, but maybe explaining why. So a really big point, and this is just an example, of hard conversations that need to be happening. We're not going to win young people if we don't have these hard conversations internally. That goes for even things that young people care about, like, for example, climate change. The very first debate that we had in the primary cycle was in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was at the same debate hall that we actually had the convention a year later, but we wanted to do a little test run in Milwaukee. So I flew up to Milwaukee. This is last August, first or second week of last August, about a year ago, I guess. And we're sitting there in Milwaukee. It's every candidate on the stage. This is the first time. So remember when all those primary Republicans were running, it was a bunch of them. It was a full stage. I think it was about 9 or 10 people. We're all standing there. And I said, we need to give a young person the opportunity to ask a question. Like this is an election cycle where a lot of people are going to be vying for the youth vote. Let's start off early with giving young people a seat at the table here. So we let a young person ask a question. I didn't ask the guy what he was going to ask. I didn't give him any talking points. Nothing. I handed him a microphone, walked him on stage, he asked a question. And what he asked, the very first question, the whole primary cycle, was climate change. Now, him and I agree on some of the things that he believes with that topic, but it's something that mattered to him. And he's voting Republican in the cycle, and he's not as far Republican as I am, he's a little bit more centrist, but that's something that mattered to him. So those are the type of things that we have to start actually talking about. Now, at no way am I saying to Republicans out there that we need to buckle our stances, that we need to become more centrist or more left-leaning. By no means am I saying that. We have to actually explain things. And the hard part, and this is what people don't want to do, is have those conversations. Every night at the convention, we had a theme. One night was like, make America safe again, make America strong again, make America powerful again, make America wealthy again. All that's really wonderful and great and looks good on a bumper sticker. What we need to do, Kyle, is make America talk again. When we start talking internally, we start talking externally, both sides of the aisle start communicating, we're going to be in a better nation, regardless of who's in the White House in January. If we start actually having conversations, we're going to live in a safer, stronger, more prosperous future and a more prosperous country. And I can start literally tomorrow. So I think that that's something that Gen Z can lead. I think that that's something that young people can be good at, is talking and just simply having conversations and just simply saying, hey, I feel very strongly about this. I don't like your party, but I do like this stance, or I like your party, but I don't like the stance. And let's talk about it. Let's have those conversations because for too long, Republicans are too afraid to talk about controversial issues, and we've lost every single election cycle since 2016. So clearly, that's not working, Kyle.
I like you so much. I'm such a Brilyn fan because what you are saying is exactly the reason I started Politically Basic. We have got to come out of our shells. The COVID, you can't talk about
Yeah.
anything or you're going to lose your family or your friends or your job. Um, and we were completely banished from talking about anything political. And we're sort
Oh
of
yeah.
like we're baby deer coming out of the woods. And you're so right. We've got to just talk about it and be okay talking about it. It's so interesting that I think sometimes in this country, there's this expectation that everyone on the left is going to completely agree and feel one certain way, and everyone on the right is going to align perfectly. But within even our major political parties and political ideologies, we're all different. So
Yeah.
nobody's going to believe exactly 100% the same thing that someone else does. And the only way that we're going to be able to kind of coalesce a little bit is exactly to your point. We've got to talk about it and understand different positions and understand these issues. So I'm so proud of you for what you're doing. I
You.
think I'm hopeful for your generation, Brilyn, that they feel the same way that you do. Do you think that they do? Do you think that they are ready to openly discuss these issues, or do we have a heads in the sand issue?
I think they are. And again, I know we mentioned COVID several times. I think COVID really kind of woke us up to the fact, again, regardless of what you think about it, regardless of what side of the aisle you're on before COVID or after COVID, that hey, we need to start talking. That we got into a position where we stopped talking and we started going to the streets and rioting and looting and protesting, and the hate got too high and the temperature in the room got way too high. We need to start talking again. And since then, we've seen an effort towards that. It hasn't been big, it's been small. But when you look at it, it's been led towards by young people. And that's something that I think can continue and it's something that needs to continue. So that's what I'm encouraging. And it's simple. It's controversial. Party leaders hate it. Party leaders want to stroke hate and division even more and want to make the country more divided because then you get more votes based off of emotion. And that's a horrible rate on the country. That's why we're in the position we're in today. So that goes for both sides. And that's something that we need to start. And I think it's simple and it starts on college campuses. When you're in a space like that, where you're on a place where you can disagree on literally every single thing under the sun. You can have completely opposite backgrounds, literally nothing in common except that you go to the same university. That's something. That's something you can start with, Kyle. And start those conversations. Start them in your classrooms. Is it scary? Absolutely, it's scary. I have people that won't sit by me at lunch because they know what I say on social media. So be it. You know what I mean? Like it's crazy, but that's the world we live in. Just start talking. Just have conversations with people. And my favorite thing to do is not to talk. This is the same thing I told President Trump. I told you about him being on Truth Social and being in an echo chamber in a bubble and not reaching actual people that he could win or sway votes, just talking to the same base. Talk to people that you know disagree with you. Have those conversations first. Those are more important and pivotal and impactful to the future than just having the same conversations with your buddies that are going to give you yes answers constantly. That's what young people need to start doing. And I think we can do that.
I know that we can. I think in the South, they call that preaching to the choir.
Yes, yes, we
And the
do.
choir needs to hear it, but we've got to be brave and branch out. And I love that you're saying, make America talk again. I think too, it's making it okay to talk again, making it safe to have those
Yeah.
conversations again. And if we're all on that page, then that will absolutely happen. But I appreciate and really respect that position that you're taking. Okay, one of the last questions I'm going to throw your way, and it's a big one and it's a tricky one, but I want to hear from you. I think your perspective on this is going to be really important. We've been hearing a lot lately this rhetoric around threats to democracy, right? And a certain group of people think that that is Donald Trump. What do you think right now in America is the biggest threat to democracy, the biggest threat to our constitutional republic?
So I have a very strong answer for this. I'm going to give it, but I'm going to walk a tightrope, not because I don't believe in what I'm about to say, but because I don't want to buy into what I'm gonna attempt to portray here. So I very clearly think that the threat to democracy is anybody out there that's trying to stoke hate and division. So I'm not going to name a particular party's name simply because that goes into that continuation. I think the threat to democracy are the same people that attempted twice to impeach a sitting president of the United States. I think the threat to democracy are the same people that tried to raid the home of a former United States president. I think the threat to democracy are the same people that tried to throw a former United States president in jail. I think the threat to democracy are the same people that shot a former president of the United States in the head. And I think the threat to democracy are the exact same people that coronated this nominee to be their party's leader without actually making any states vote for her in a primary election. They just kind of said, whoop-de-doo, you're our leader. Yay, that's it. I think that's a genuine threat to democracy. I think the actual accusation of saying that Donald Trump's threat to democracy, using somebody's name or calling a party by, again, stoking more hate and division, making the temperature way too high in the room, is a threat to democracy within itself. So I think anybody using that needs to stop. Kyle, you'll remember in 2018, 2019, when the press is the enemy of the people line starting, I was against that because, again, I thought that within itself was a threat to democracy. Do I agree with some of the journalists on TV that are really activist in journalist clothing? Yes, I disagree with that. But am I going to say a blanket statement that the press is the enemy to the people? No, I strongly disagree with that. That goes against every First Amendment right in the entire Constitution. It's horrible. So I think that term within itself has become this buzzword. This every cycle has a buzzword or a phrase or a political innuendo, and that's what that is right now. So it's going to be in every campaign ad. Both sides are using it. People need to tune that out and actually look at the facts. And what I found really interesting, and I saw this go both ways, I had people come up to me at the convention in Milwaukee and say, I wanted to prove so bad that you were an evil, horrible person spewing hate and spewing lies. So I did research and I actually found out that what you're saying is the truth. And that was fascinating to me that people were really willing to do that and admit that. I think that needs to happen across the country. I think people across the country need to start doing independent research and stop listening to party bosses and stop listening to the mainstream media and actually listen to independent research and do it themselves and come up with topics for themselves. I started this interview saying that I'm a Christian conservative because of the morals and values of the community I was raised in. But since I've become independently thinking, I'm still a Christian conservative, but it's on my own set. It's not because my mom told me to be, or my dad told me to be, or my grandparents always voted that way. It's because that's genuinely what I've seen in real world experiences in the past 7 years. That's what Americans need to do. And then the threat to democracy will go away.
You're sharing a whole lot of wisdom, Brilyn, and I really hope as many people as possible can hear from you. I hope as many people as possible grab this book and read it. It's
Thank you.
It's educational and inspirational at the same time. And I'm just so grateful to you for coming on the show today and sharing your thoughts, your perspective, your experience as a great representative of Gen Z. And I am very much looking forward to tracking with you in your future, hopefully having you back on the show again very
Anytime.
soon and seeing where life takes you, because I absolutely know it is very exciting, successful places. So, Brilyn, thank you so much for being with us today and for sharing your brilliant mind and your heart with us on Politically Basic today.
Hal, thank you so much. This was so much fun. Appreciate you and your incredible team and your audience for all that y'all do. Keep fighting the good fight, and I appreciate you. We'll come back anytime.
Wonderful. Thank you, sir. And thank you all for joining us on this episode of Politically Basic. We're committed to breaking down the basics, so you get to decide. Be sure to check us out at politicallybasic.com and follow us at Politically Basic so you don't miss an episode. And we'll see you next time.